And thanks to all of you for being here. Well done for making the time to learn how to have more meaningful conversations with people at work and in your life. As I'm sure Joanna told you, I am a coach. I have a small leadership development firm. I have another one of my colleagues with me who you'll meet in just a few minutes. And, we very much believe in the power of coaching. And there are a lot of people like us who spend years with getting accredited and getting the training to make coaching our professions. But in reality, some of the most impactful conversations that you have at work happen in the course of just everyday interaction. Someone comes into your office, or you have to have a performance management discussion with somebody. And there are some techniques and skills that we use in our coaching practice that we're going to share with you. I've got some models that you'll be able to take back and use to bring out the best in others in your everyday life, certainly at work with your colleagues. I even use some of these techniques with my husband, who would be so embarrassed to know that I was saying that. But anyway, so let's just jump right in. And to get you in the mindset of the power of coaching, I'm going to do just a quick little poll here. So I'm going to ask a question, and I just want you to raise your hand. I think there's a little hand raise icon. So raise your hand if what I say applies to you. What I'm interested in is the last time you had an aha moment. The last time you had like a really good breakthrough idea. Were you in the shower? How many of you have really good ideas in the shower? Yes. Yep. Oh, yeah. Okay. A lot of us. Me too. I have a very wet notebook next to my shower where I write ideas down. Okay. How about the last time you had an aha moment? Were you working out? Exercising? Yes. Some good thinking while we're sweaty. Jackie and I are both raising our hands. Us too. Okay, how about the last time you had an aha moment when you were stressed out thinking about the problem? Okay, so fewer of you. So more people, okay. So fewer of you, but some folks do think really well under stress, apparently. That's not the usual, but good for you. I'm very excited to see that. Okay, the next one is last time that you had an aha moment when someone was giving you advice or telling you what to do. Okay. Fewer of us. Yeah. So that's more typical. Not very many of us have our best ideas. When people are telling us what to do, it's actually very hard to solve a problem when you are focused on the problem. And we're going to talk about why that is in just a minute. So let me give you kind of the lay of the land for today. We're going to talk about how to, by using coaching conversation skills, you can create the conditions for other people to have those aha moments. And this does not require getting in the shower with anybody or working out with them. This is just in the course of everyday conversations. So here's today how it's going to go. First, I'm going to share with you 3 principles about how we think and how the brain works that kind of lays the scientific groundwork for the coaching models that I'm going to share. We're going to talk about what coaching is and what it isn't, and also when it's good to use a coaching approach versus, sometimes you do just have to tell people what to do. We'll talk about the principles of coaching. So when you're in that coach mode, your coach hat on, what your role is, and some basic how-tos. And we'll walk you through how this looks in practice. So I've got a basic coaching model that I'll share with you, and then a specific version of the model for having performance feedback conversations, because I know that's something that a lot of my clients and the folks I run into kind of have some difficulty with. So we're going to show you both models, and at the very end, Jackie and I are going to to do two coaching demos, one where we're helping a colleague solve a problem and one where we're giving performance feedback. And for those of you who can stick on until the end, I do have some like cheat sheets, some little flashcards that I'm going to give you my contact information. You can email me and I'll send them to you. So you can take these models back and practice them at work. So I'm going to just very briefly, there I am, so you can put a voice with the name, or the voice with the face. I'm sure Joanna told you all about my credentials, so I won't repeat that. Just a little about me personally. You know, I'm a working mom. I am talking to you from New York, where I live and work. I always say I'm trying to figure life as a professional woman out, just like we all are. I've been in leadership development for 8 years professionally, longer than that, you know, if you count my education. But I'm in this field because I think that leadership is the key to improving quality of life around the world. And it takes a lot of committed people like you who want to have that positive impact and be a positive force in your own lives and in the lives of people you work with. And be that positive ripple effect. And so I spend most of my time coaching smart, ambitious women like all of you who have their sights set on senior management, or they already are established executives, and help get more women into senior management, into that C-suite. And so a lot of my clients have gotten promoted, and I've grown with them in their careers, and that's been really one of the great joys of my life. So thank you all again for being here. I'm going to start by laying the scientific groundwork very briefly for the coaching models. And to do that, I am going to illustrate the first one by asking you another question. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to give you a word. And what I'd like you to do is take a mental screenshot of the very first image that comes into your mind when I say this word. So what is the very first thing that comes to mind when I say banana? Okay, type in the chat box, like, what image comes in. Okay, fruit, yellow, a banana split. Oh my gosh, I love that. Apple, yellow, curve, potassium. The actual banana. Oh my gosh, I love this. A monkey. Yes, I get monkey a lot. Banana pudding from Magnolia's. There's another New Yorker for sure. So I love it. What comes to mind when I think banana is like what I see is my toddler throwing a banana on the floor. Like that's the first thing that comes into mind. So this is a really important principle, and it's probably the most important thing you can ever remember about collaborating and communicating with other people. The brain is a connection machine, and no two are alike. We process information in a narrative format, and everyone is living their own story. And you can't assume that, someone comes into a conversation with the same ideas as you, or even after getting more information is going to understand a situation the same way as you. And this is really how misunderstandings happen and why advice isn't often that helpful. I mean, you can imagine if someone comes into my office and says, I have a banana problem, and then I tell them how I got my toddler to eat bananas, that could be a very unfortunate misunderstanding. This is because the brain hardwires everything it can, and these shortcuts drive our automatic perceptions. So all of the kind of first images that came to mind when I said banana and how different they were across all of us, those are our sort of automatic perceptions. And, I'm not, without getting into like the parts of the brain, I'm sure you've heard of the two-system brain, that we have this automatic, fast, subconscious way of thinking and a slower, more deliberate, conscious way of thinking. And the automatic system is there because, we're just taking in so much information at all times. And our working memory, so the amount of energy our brain has to think, is a limited resource. And so our brain kind of creates these shortcuts so that our thoughts become automatic and then it doesn't have to do any more work. And what perception becomes hardwired depends on a lot of things, like how recently you experienced something. So like 2 years ago, I probably would have had a different automatic reaction to the word banana when I didn't have my toddler. How many times it's happened, it can drive perception. Also, if something if an event has a particular emotional charge, then that will sort of become your automatic reaction to something. And, just the pace of business and life and how much information we're inundated with all the time, our automatic thinking is sort of how we are walking around in the world. It's like we are biased toward our own connections because that is the story that we have been living. Now, the good news is that we can create new connections. We, in other words, can change our minds. We just have to have the right conditions. And so we have to, this is the concept of neuroplasticity. I'm sure you've heard of that. And the idea is that in order to construct new wiring, to construct new stories, to think of things in a different way, we have to engage that slower, more deliberate, conscious thinking. Now, in coaching, and when you're in that mode, you're effectively creating the conditions for people to engage that critical, creative, receptive, kind of our higher self conscious way of thinking in order to take new perspectives, see things in a different way, and have those aha moments. Now, we have a challenge as coaches and managers and people just in the world, and that is that to do our best thinking, we need to stay in discover mode and out of defend mode, and the person that we're talking with needs to be in discover mode and out of defend mode. This is the third principle about the brain that explains kind of the importance of coaching approaches, and that is the defend discover axis. So our brain is all the time subconsciously scanning the environment for threats to defend against and rewards to discover. It actually takes very little to put a person's brain into defensive mode. In fact, there's about 5 times more real estate in the brain dedicated to threats than rewards. And so we all have this very easy tendency to feel threatened. The problem is people are not at our smartest when we are in defensive mode. In fact, a threat response decreases our ability to think. It narrows our field of perception. We kind of get into tunnel vision when we're stressed. It dampens our creativity, or dampens our receptiveness to new ideas, other people's ideas. And so we can't see issues clearly or work well with others or have novel ideas when we are under a threat response. And so the question then for us, or the challenge is, how do we keep people in that creative, clear thinking, expansive, creative, kind of receptive mindset? So let's talk for a moment about what coaching is and what it isn't. I'm going to introduce you to the TAPS model, TAPS. This is from the Neuro Leadership Institute. That's where I got my training certification. And for what it's worth, according to my husband, this is the most helpful thing he's ever gotten from my 8 years of coaching. So I'll make this the main takeaway for you. And what the TAPS model says is that there are 2 modes that you can have in a conversation. You can be asking or you can be telling. And then there's 2 focuses that you could have. You could be talking about a problem or you can be talking about the solution. And coaching is this top right-hand quadrant that is primarily focused on asking the other person about the solution. It is forward thinking. It is focused on possibilities, focused on the ideal, focused on the vision, what could be. And by, asking versus telling, you're helping people think about and develop their own thinking versus imposing your own thinking. And it's positive, it's empowering, and because of that, it's rewarding. And so it keeps that thinking brain engaged and excited. I'm going to touch very briefly on what coaching isn't. It's also, not about telling people what to do. So training or mentoring, basically what Jackie and I are doing right now is telling you how to have coaching conversations is training. It's also not about asking about the problem. That's what, happens, like cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, asks a lot of like, okay, well, tell me how this problem came to be in order to, identify it and then change the story, right? From a coaching perspective, I'm not as concerned about how a person came to believe what they believe or how a problem happened, or, like with consulting and performance management, what the root cause was, right? I sort of cringe at the word debrief because it's all about what happened, whose fault was it, what did you do wrong? And that focus is really on, it's threatening, right? Because you're focused on the problem. And it's also focused on, imposing your own thinking, right? We all know consulting firms that get paid lots of money to tell us about the problems. And what happens when you're focused on the problem is that it takes you really, really quickly into like the drama and the emotion and the details about the problem, which can shut down our cognitive resources and make it hard to actually move to a solution. So, where we spend most of our time as coaches is in this asking about the solution quadrant. Now, just a quick note, I know a lot of you are managers, and so you're going to have to switch into, you switch in and out, right? There are going to be sometimes you have to tell people what to do or what not to do, but a coaching approach can be really helpful in certain situations. Coaching is really helpful when you want to empower people to think for themselves and take ownership of turning those insights into action. So helping people come up with their own ideas, solve their own problems. It's really good when people are stuck and you need to get them kind of unstuck and moving forward. It's really good when you want to help people resolve conflict that they're having with somebody else because you're focusing on, well, what do you want this relationship or this interaction to look like versus like, oh, what did they do this time? So it's really good at resolving conflict. It's also really, really helpful for learning and development, especially feedback. So just think about how, it hits your own ear. It's instead of, well, here's what you did wrong, it's, what did you learn from this? Or what would you like to do differently next time? Really helpful for those type of conversations. Okay, so asking about the solution, what does that sound like in practice? Someone comes into you and says, I'm totally overwhelmed. Asking about the solution sounds like, well, what do you think would make you feel better? As opposed to maybe our natural tendency is to say, what's going on? Or what's wrong? Or what happened? Right? So what do you think would make you feel better? Another example. Kevin is being a pain in the butt. Well, what do you want him to do? Versus, what did he do this time? A little side note, I don't know if you've seen some of my other jam sessions or like See Me Speak. For some reason, Kevin is always the bad guy. I don't know why. There's no Kevin in my life that's done anything bad to me. That'll be a question for a therapist. But anyway, so Kevin is always the bad guy. All right. So turning it's funny, my brother's Kevin. Someone just says from the audience. So it's what do you want him to do? What do you want Kevin to help you with, right? Okay, last example, I'm stuck. What are you trying to do? What do you want to see happen? What's your vision? what's ideal, versus what's wrong. And remember, too, that we are going to have, always, we're going to have to kind of guard against our brain's own tendency to want to go into that, like, what's wrong mode, right? What's threatening? So you, as the coach part of the conversation, have to make sure that you are, always focusing on the solution. Okay, so you're probably thinking at this point, like, okay, am I just asking questions the whole time? And wouldn't that sound weird? And the answer is no, you won't be asking questions the whole time. How the conversation will actually play out is in this cycle of active listening. And I do see someone ask if the slides are going to be shared. You will, yeah, so we will have the slides available for you. It's being recorded. Also, I'm going to give you all my contact information after this, and I have the TAPS model and this slide and then the next slide on flashcards so that you can take them back to work and use them. So you can just email me at the end and I will send them to you. So the active listening cycle. So remember, your role as a coach is to not only help people think about their thinking, it is also to propel the conversation forward to get to a solution. And so here's what you're going to be doing. So you're asking questions focused on the solution, and then your job is to listen for the positive in what the person is saying. So listen for the solution. What is the improvement that needs to happen? What's the opportunity? What's the goal? So, you might even need to kind of flip the conversation a little bit on someone, like to keep it focused on the positive. So let's say someone comes in and says, Kevin's being a pain in the butt. And you're like, well, what do you need Kevin to do? Well, I need Kevin to stop being a pain in the butt. So what you would then say is, sounds like Kevin could be more helpful. That's an example of kind of focusing on the solution. And what I just said there with sounds like Kevin can be more helpful is clarifying. So clarifying is as distinctly as possible, reflecting back to the other person what you are hearing them say. And sometimes your coachee is going to be very clear in their thinking in response to what you ask. And that's great. And you can kind of just move on to the next stage of the conversation, which we'll go over the stages in just a moment here. Sometimes they're not going to be so clear, right? They might get into a lot of detail, or they might kind of, I don't know. And you will need to just continue to clarify what it is that you're hearing. 2 rules about clarifying. The first is you cannot clarify too much. There's no such thing. And you'll hear me clarify in the coaching demo that I'm going to do with Jackie in just a minute. The other thing is you cannot do it wrong. Like sometimes we get tripped up in wanting to, get it right and like say exactly the right thing that the person is saying. But actually by reflecting back to the person what you're hearing, you can actually help them get clarity on their way of thinking. Like maybe you say, well, it sounds like Kevin could be more helpful. And they're like, well, it's not really that, it's this. Well, that's good. I mean, then you've gotten them one step to clarity, further to clarity themselves. So you basically follow this active listening cycle of question, listening, and then clarifying until the person that you're talking with has a bright idea that you want to help them move forward on in terms of moving into action. So until you get this little light bulb go off. Also, one quick note before we move on. If you do need to go into tell mode versus asking, do it. But you want to ask permission, which I'll talk about in just a second, and try to practice the 90-10 rule. That's kind of what I tell myself is spend 90% of the time asking and then 10% kind of stepping in. Jackie and I were actually talking about this the other night that, sometimes if someone's really stuck and you're asking them really good questions, they might be like, I don't know, that's why I'm talking to you. and you want to throw them a life raft. Like, give them time to think about it, but you don't want to let them flounder too long, right? And so the trick is, stepping in effectively, and that is the trick to that is asking permission. So I might say, like, I can tell you're stuck. I could tell you a few things that work for other people. Would that be helpful? That's a way of asking permission. Or, as a manager or a friend, you might need to redirect the person. Like, they might be going down a road that you're like, no, I know that's not the right way to go. And you need to redirect them. You can step in, but again, ask permission. And the way that I do that is I'll say, okay, that's one option. That's one way to think about it. Can I offer you another? That keeps them in the driver's seat, and it keeps it focused on their thinking while being able to kind of, guide the conversation forward. So you've got your asking about the solution. You've got your active listening cycle down. This is this is sort of the whole model overview of how our coaching conversation happens. And don't feel like you need to scramble to write all this down, because I can send this to you after the presentation. Remember, when you have your coach hat on, you're helping create the conditions for insights. You're helping them create a vision. You're also moving them to take ownership over what's next. So here's moving from vision to action, the VIEW model. The first piece is creating a vision and some of the questions that you might ask around this. So what would you like to see happen? What are you going for? What's ideal? What outcome are you working for? I usually ask a question that gets them to attach some kind of, emotion to it. Like, if you could do that, what would that mean? So I have a client right now who got some 360 feedback back, and basically she set a goal in response to that she needs to build stronger relationships at work, right? And so the question was, well, what does a Lisa with stronger relationships at work look like? Like, what does that mean? And if you could have stronger relationships at work, what would that mean? So then she says, well, people would probably like working with me more, and I would have more fun at work too. Well, like, who wouldn't want to move that into action, right, when you kind of have that vision? So when you are clear on sort of what the ideal is or what they're working towards, then the next phase is to explore potential ways forward. Notice that this stuff is called explore, and it's not skipping to planning on what's next. And that's because, remember, that our first instinct is to really go with that kind of automatic hardwired perception. And so that idea might not be the right one. So you want to help the person you're talking with kind of have new ideas or get unstuck. So you want to spend some time in this phase. Some questions there. So what would that take? What would enable you to do that? I almost always ask, what else could you try? Like, get them really like thinking expansively. So in Lisa's case, so what would it take for you to have stronger relationships at work? Well, I probably need to be more like inclusive and collaborative. Okay, what would enable you to do that? Probably need to reach out to my business partners sooner to talk to them about implications for their parts of the business. All right, what else? Well, I probably need to meet with my team more often. Okay, great. So now you've got two things that you can work with to move forward. And then you move to the next phase. So, okay, so what's next? What would you like to start on? What do you want to try first? When do you want to do that? So in Lisa's case, it's like, well, how often do you want to meet with your team? And when's the next chance you have? Or like, what's the next project that you want to loop your business partners in on earlier? And who do you want to go to first, right? So it's really deciding on what is next and nailing down an action or two. So we are going to kind of pause on the theoretical here for a second, and Jackie and I are going to do a quick coaching demo for you. I want to introduce you to Jackie. There's Jackie. She always looks like this. She's always smiling, happy. Jackie, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jennifer. So I'll save you from just reading the slide that you can obviously see, and just tell you a little bit about how I began my practice. And so I began the practice with a real focus on helping people improve their relationship with work. I had a mission in mind to spread more joy in the workforce. And I work with a lot of people who are looking to improve the work they currently do and improve sort of the lens they see the work through. I also work with those in need of support and really looking for next steps towards something new. I know exactly how it is to kind of wade the waters of overwhelm when you're looking for the right next thing. And so my clients are getting into more alignment with what they do and in turn having happier, healthier, more productive work lives. So I have to say that I love the interest in this webinar topic. All of you that have joined the call and all the leaders that are here that have joined and really seeing the importance of the impact and the values that you're able to add. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely. Jackie is like the person that I go to when I feel like someone needs help reigniting their spark in their work or their life. She's just, she's awesome at that. Okay, so we're going to go through a quick coaching demo. I'm going to put the model back up here so that you can kind of follow along with what we're doing. And in this demo, we're going to pretend, because role playing is always not awkward at all. We're going to pretend that I am Jackie's manager and she's coming into my office with a problem. Oh, good question, Debbie. Sorry, Jackie Allen. Allen is her last name. Question. Okay, so Jackie's my employee. Here we go. What's up, Jackie?
Oh my God, I've had the worst day. My kids wouldn't get dressed for school and the train was late. I was super rushed getting here and I had a million calls this morning. I haven't gotten a chance at all to look at the slides for Tuesday's meeting.
Well, it sounds like today's been tough, but you're focused on the right thing.
Well, I'm super frustrated with Kevin.
What are you trying to get Kevin to do?
He needs to sign off on the last draft of the slides before I can even do much with it.
Sounds like Kevin could be more helpful.
Well, the issue is more that Mary has Kevin running around another fire drill, and that just came up today.
Oh, okay. He could probably help you if Mary freed him up long enough.
Yeah, totally, and I don't even need that much time.
How much time would you need, ideally?
We could probably do it in about half an hour.
Okay, let's think about how we get you that half hour.
Well, I've already emailed him like 5 times.
Okay, so maybe what else could you try?
He probably just needs Mary to tell him it's okay to stop her thing, and then he can really look at this.
Yeah, you might need both of them to kind of prioritize this.
Well, the presentation should be pretty important to her, too. I don't know. What do you think I should do?
Well, when can you talk to them?
I think I'll go see Kevin in Mary's office now and just ask them if I can come in for a minute.
Okay, good. Sounds good. So we've got a step forward. We're going to stop there. So this is a really simple scenario, right? And we'll talk about a trickier one in just a minute in the next demo. But I use this example because the point of this whole jam session is to help you use coaching techniques in the course of everyday life. And how often does it happen that someone comes into your office with a problem and it sucks up a lot of time and they're sort of venting or complaining, right? And the next thing you know, it's been 20 minutes and there's no action forward. And so we use this example to show you how you can, like, in pretty short order, like, change the trajectory of a conversation from someone who's frustrated and stuck and has a real problem to seeing their way clear to solving the problem and getting unstuck. The other thing I didn't mention, but is an important point to make here, is you probably noticed that there were some times when I asked a question and then stayed quiet and gave Jackie like a second to think about it, and that's okay. You want to kind of give them time to think through their thinking. Okay, Let's talk about a little trickier of a scenario, and that is the feedback conversation. So feedback is a funny thing because we all crave it. Like, humans need to know how well we're doing, and we want to know how to learn and grow. They're two basic human needs. At the same time, I mean, even just hearing, like, can I give you some feedback is like enough to be like, oh my God, what happened? What did I do? And your brain sort of goes into that threatened kind of mode, which you now know will really shut down your ability to come up with a solution and move forward. I mean, how often have you had a feedback conversation with someone, either giving it or receiving it, where you, like, after the meeting, you're like, oh, darn, I really should have said that. And that's just because you're not thinking clearly often at times when you're kind of in that let's talk about what you need to do better mode. So we're going to show you a model of feedback that is brain friendly. And it's just a different version of the view model. So this is called self-directed feed forward. And again, I did not come up with that. That is from the Neuro Leadership Institute. The two important pieces of this. So self-directed means they go first, they lead. You start with what they think. When we're being told by someone where we could improve, that creates a threat response. But when we give ourselves feedback, it actually lights up the reward centers in our brain, because it's almost like we're imagining this like future best self, right? And that's really rewarding. So self-directed. You always want them to go first. Again, it's asking versus telling. The feed forward piece, you'll notice it's not feedback, it's feed forward. Because why? Because we are focused on the solution. We're focused on, well, what do you want to see happen in the future, as opposed to what happened, what went wrong, what's past. So the solution versus the problem. Okay, here's how it looks. The first step is asking permission. So it's really important in a feedback conversation is to get them in the driver's seat right off the bat. And this is simple. This is just saying, hey, let's take a few minutes and talk about whatever, the meeting, the conversation, your performance goals for the year. Is now a good time? Is it okay if we do that now? And then you want to ask them to start with what they think they did well, or what's going well. So what did you do that you'd like to do next time? Or like, what do you think you're doing really well? And you might have to be really persistent because, again, bad is greater than good in the brain, and we all sort of tend to like be real negative on ourselves, and it's hard to give positive feedback. You just be persistent. You'll see I'm a little bit difficult with Jackie in our coaching demo, but she gets me there. So they go first, but then on the positive feedback, you always add on, always express your appreciation too. So you might say, you might say to them, what's one small thing you think you did well, if you need to be, persistent with them. And they might say, they answer you, and then you will say, I totally agree. It was great how you handled that situation with Kevin. And I also really appreciated how important it was and how committed you were to getting those reports done on time. To always add on to the positive. Okay, and then you go into, you ask them again what they might want to do differently next time or going forward. The key piece being the forward-looking vision piece. So what might you do differently next time? Or what did you learn from this that you could, you'd want to do in your next meeting or your next presentation or next year? Okay, and then what happens then, so they'll say, well, I think I could really have done X, Y, Z, or I'd really like to do blah, blah, blah going forward. And chances are you as the manager, you have something in mind that you want them to do differently. There's a good chance that they will get it on their own, and they'll just say it, and you won't have to. And if that happens, you just agree and encourage. And then you can just go into that view model, right? So go back into, all right, well, what would that look like? And like, how can we help you get there? So, you just say, I agree. Let's talk about what that might look like. Pick up on the view model and create a vision and do next steps. Or they might miss something that you think is really important. And if so, that's fine too. That's where permission comes in again. So you'll say, let's say, I agree that pausing to reflect on what you're about to say might help you with Kevin in the future. I also noticed one other thing that you could try. Do you mind if I share? So it's just pausing and asking permission. So with that, we're going to do another demo of a performance conversation. So you'll just be self-directed feed forward in action. We're actually going to pick back up on the Kevin and Mary scenario, but this time Jackie's going to be my boss, and she's going to coach me.
Jen, I'd love to take a few minutes to reflect on how your conversation with Kevin and Mary went. Is now a good time?
Yeah, totally.
So what were you happy with?
Oh, I don't know. I really wish that I had...
Sorry to interrupt, but I really love to start by focusing on what you did well. So we can talk about what you want to do differently, but let's start with the good stuff.
Okay. Well, I was really stressed, as you know, when we talked this morning. And before I went up to Mary's floor, I kind of took a second and took a breather. And I think that really helped me, not be so frantic going into Mary's office.
I totally agree. Anytime you pause and reflect or even just take a breath before an important conversation, it helps you communicate more effectively. I also really appreciated your commitment to getting those reports in on time.
Thanks.
What would you do differently next time?
Well, I wish I'd been able to figure it out on my own, just to talk to Kevin and Mary at the same time. It seems like such a simple answer.
Well, you did actually figure it out on your own. I just helped you sort it out. The last couple of times this particular report has come up, I've noticed something going on that I think could help you move forward. Are you okay if we talk about that right now?
Yeah, please.
So I've seen you spend a lot of time emailing and then waiting for Kevin to email you back. And once you're able to connect either in person or on the phone, you've got what you needed pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point. I probably should have just called him or tracked him down rather than sending a million emails.
I think so too. And let me know if there's something I can help you with next time too.
Thank you. Okay, great. So that seems like a good place to stop, because I know I want to save some time for questions. Before we go to the Q&A part, I just want to make sure that you have my email address. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. This is a really important conversation that we are having today for you to have more meaningful conversations with people you work with. I have some flashcards if you would like to take them back to work so that you can practice. They're especially helpful if you have a phone call. Sometimes I use them myself when I want a coaching call. So just email me and I will send them to you. And if any of you feel like you need to get in touch with Jackie, I will put you in touch with her as well. Okay, so that's it for me, Joanna. If you want to move to some Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Thank you, first of all, for this presentation so far, for you and Jackie as well. Thank you, guys. And I love your little demos. That was really fun. It's helpful to sort of hear that kind of stuff happen in practice. So I think that was really helpful. And to anyone who hasn't sent in their questions yet, please feel free to do so in that chat. We have just some time to get through a few of them, so I'll go ahead and get started. Jen, our first question reads, in this coaching model, and I think when our listener asked us, we were looking at the view model, would it be beneficial to focus on strengths of the individual being coached?
Yes, I love the question. Okay, I'm just trying to pull up the model. There it is. Yes, Patricia, I see that. I love this question, and the answer is absolutely yes. And that goes into that kind of listening for the positive, and listening for the learning. So, like a really good question might be, so what did you learn from this experience or situation that, you can apply the next time you're in the situation? That's one way to like kind of focus on their learning, their strengths. The other thing is, when, again, going back into that kind of 90-10 rule, like sometimes you need to step in and give some guidance. That is an awesome place to start, is to be like, I've, just working with you for a couple of years, I've noticed that you're really good at something that I feel like could help you. Let's talk about that for a second. So absolutely, you want to focus on strengths. I love that question. Good question.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question that comes through. How would you recommend modifying some of these tips for when you're attempting to coach a small group or lead a collaborative session?
Yeah, totally. It's kind of infinitely customizable. I mean, I think the general idea of creating a vision first, and having like a collective vision for moving forward is really important. Some of the ways that, and I can just tell you, like in my own practice when I've worked with teams, like on team cohesion and strategic planning and things like that, what you can do is start out by asking this question. And I think it's really important for everybody to give their individual answers. So sometimes something I'll do is I will be like, okay, let's all talk about the outcomes that are important to us. And I'll put them I'll have people write them on like a sticky note, for example. And then we put them all up on the board. And then it's like, okay, well, and then we begin to see what are the commonalities. And usually you'll get a few common themes. Like, okay, so our vision as a group moving forward is that we want to, we want to hit these 5 objectives, right? And then you turn the questions back to the group. Then you're able to have a clear vision, and then you can say, all right, what would that take? What would enable you to do that? The tricky thing, let's see, I don't see the name of the person who asked this question, but the tricky thing with a group that you'll need to, if you're facilitating, is you'll definitely be needing to be on the lookout, be like the solution police, not the problem, I always in the back of my mind, I always think about Michelle Obama's when they go low, you go high. So if, in a group, it's really easy and tempting to devolve into root cause and blame and whatever. And it's really going to be incumbent on you as a facilitator to be like, okay, well, let's focus back on this vision and what do we need to see happen to achieve this vision. And you'll really want to practice your skills at how to flip the problem focus into the solution focus.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Jen. The next question reads, at what point should the manager step in? Maybe in your demo situation, at what point should they have just called Mary or Kevin in with Jackie to solve the problem right then?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those situations where it's like, do you want to have a coach approach or do you want to, have a manager approach? And I think it depends on a lot of things. I mean, way back in the day, I was in corporate America myself, and so was Jackie. We both were managers. And I think it depends on the urgency. I think it depends on the situation at hand. If it's something that you feel like is an opportunity for your employee to develop in terms of coming up with their own answer, then I think a coaching approach is better. If you have time, if you have that, 10 minutes or whatever it is to have that conversation. If it's a little bit urgent, then maybe you need to make a suggestion. Or let's say Jackie and I had this conversation and it took 20 minutes and then I had right? And she wasn't getting there. And I was like, hey, you keep emailing Kevin. That's not getting you anywhere. Can I step in with a suggestion? It sounds like, I think Mary needs to prioritize this too. And so I think it's kind of tough in like a theoretical way to answer that question. But I think, anytime that you can help a person come up with their own solution and solve it themselves is going to empower them, help them learn and grow. It's also going to free you up, right, as a manager from getting involved in some of the day-to-day things.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. We have time for one more question. Let's see here. We had a couple come into the chat just now. This was a good one. Not to be a negative Nelly, but with someone who is involved with hiring and firing, what are repeated signs that someone is just non-coachable?
I love that question. I have run into people that I did not work with or have chosen not to work with because I just deem them not coachable. I think, for me, a good litmus test is like how able are they to move into that mode of imagining the possibilities, and how, despite your best efforts, let's say they continue to be a negative Nelly, right? If they can't, if there's someone who is always focused on the problem, and they aren't, and who else's fault it is, and what the context is, and they aren't someone who are showing signs of taking ownership, right, over the next steps, then that might be a sign that they can't be coached. I will usually ask in a few different ways, things like, well, what's your role in making this happen? To see if I can get them to start to see they can find their way out of it. So you've told me what you don't want. What do you want? Or, so you've told me what the problem is. What is the solution? And if they're just totally resistant to being able to see a solution focus, then that might be a sign that they're not coachable. I have this it maybe probably throws people into that threat response a little bit, but I have a kind of little trick that I'll do with some clients if I feel like they're really resisting taking any responsibility. I'll just be like, and you probably don't want to do this as a manager. I'm just telling you my version of it. But I'll have someone, I'll be like, okay, take out your notebook, wherever you're taking notes, and I want you to write down, I am not going to do anything about the situation. And nobody wants to do that, and they're like, whoa, wait. And so again, that's a situation of strategically using a little bit of threat, which as a manager, you sometimes might have to do. But hopefully that helps, helps you open up a conversation around okay, what are we going to do to solve this?
I love that. Thanks so much, Jen. Thank you again for the presentation and for having Jackie on with you and for answering these questions from our members. Lots of really great advice and tips on here. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. As Jennifer mentioned, feel free to reach out to her if you have questions. I'm actually going to jump back to that slide, Jen, with your contact info on. She mentioned that the recording will be up on the website tomorrow, but if you want the slides, feel free to reach out to her for those. And yeah, thanks again. You can reach out to us as well here at Elevate. You can find us at info@elevatenetwork.com. We'd love to hear your questions or your feedback about our jam session today, or just our webinars in general. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Google+. We're on all the social media pages, so give us a follow and say hi. Once again, the recording will be on our website starting tomorrow for you to watch the replay. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you.